my friends, and welcome to episode 51 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast.
Right.
We are your hosts. I'm Pasquale Veri.
And I am Claudio Spera. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Born in Brooklyn, New York, our next guest became an artist in narrative painting. His work is inspired by many facets of his own life. In this episode, we will discuss how his work is, in essence, an autobiography of the man, and how Kiss fits into that particular picture. Kiss Army, please welcome Victor Stabin to the show. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be alive.
First of all, Victor, thank you, for making yourself available in your busy agenda. So, just to get the show going, we know that your inspirations and interests are very wide and varied. So to understand better those inspirations, tell us a little bit about yourself and your early interests in narrative painting.
Well, I started out in life drawing all the time, and that's where I got most of my satisfaction and most of my confidence. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a household where it was fostered by my mom, and my dad was an inventor. He invented scientific instrumentation for research and development. And so he worked at home and he did his thing, and he was really impassioned by it, by the possibilities of all the different things that he could manufacture or think of. And I think that being an artist, it's very much solitary existence. Like Picasso said, no masterpiece was ever created unless in solitude. And so there's social quality in everybody's life, but I think your question was, where does it come from? It mm-hmm. came from, watching the good parts of my parents, or picking up on the good parts of my parents that fostered me being an artist. Also, I was a dyslexic kid, and so reading was something I didn't really do a lot. I was highly skilled in math, but I loved drawing at the same time. So mm-hmm. you sort of go with your strengths. So here I am.
And your mom, she was a musician, I guess. She played the piano.
She was a piano teacher for 70 years.
Wow!
Yeah, wow. She died about a year and a half ago. And she's 91 years old, and she taught piano since she was like 15.
Wow.
Almost 75 years of teaching piano.
That's fantastic. So, Victor, reading through your bio on your website, it kind of struck me that your inspirations are really far removed from anything Kiss. Now, before we discuss your connections with Kiss, tell us a little bit about your inspirations, because I think understanding your inspirations is a way of understanding who you are. So, for example, what exactly is an eco-surrealist alliterator?
All right, so if you go to my website, you'll see a series of paintings called the Turtle Series. The Turtle Series mm-hmm. uses, I stopped illustrating about 20-something years ago. I decided to become a painter, but I paint narratively because my skills were developed through narration. And so I had to pick something. I wanted to have a theme, because I think the art world respects obsession, or like a constant theme that they could say, this guy does that. Whether it's like, this guy does that for 5 years or 2 years, but they want to see a body of work. So I picked like some things that I liked, but I also wanted to be universal, because as an illustrator, I never wanted to pander, but I always wanted to communicate with a broad audience. Mm-hmm. So I just came upon turtles because I'd seen a couple of paintings with turtles in it. One was by Magritte and one was by a painter named Marshall Arisman. Magritte's gone, Arisman's a contemporary. And I started this series that started as an assignment. And as I started doing it, it became autobiographical in that I started putting family members in it. And so it kind of brought me into the world of like the ecological part of like what we should all be concerned with. Like, what are we doing here? How are we treating the planet? And so I started selling prints of my work and donating a portion of it to conservation groups. Mm-hmm. And so I say, the question is, what is an eco-surrealistic alliterator? Okay, I'm doing these paintings, and while I'm doing the paintings, my kids are being born, right? I started a series of paintings before they were born. Now they're here. They're 1, they're 2, they're 3 years old. I'm reading them tons of ABC books, which are mind-numbing. Like A is for apple, B is for B is for cat, you know? But anyway, so A is for apple, B is for bat, C is for cat, whatever. And I'm a real fan of the dictionary. Like I said earlier, my strength wasn't reading. I started to read when I was 26 years old. Read just for the pleasure of reading, not just because I had to learn something. I just wanted to like get into language and get into storytelling. And I kept the dictionary by my side and I looked up every word that I didn't know, to the point where after I sort of gleaned 200 new words, people came up to me and said, "You're the smartest person I know." And I'd look at them, no. I just learned 200 words. I'm the smartest person I know. So when I started making the ABC book, I used a dictionary for inspiration. And so I started making alliterations, and A is for apperceptive, accetina. Apperception is the mind's ability to perceive itself outside of itself. And an accetina is a gigantic African snail. And so I have this set of paintings that are eco-friendly in that they put animals, they use turtles as a substitute for human beings. And then all of a sudden I switch gears and I start making this ABC book. I made A is for apperceptive accetina, B is for bifoliated bonito, C is for caoutchouc oidal chelonia. The letter C, I said, I'm going to do the whole book. It took me about 3.5 years. So I have this series of surrealistic paintings where I use turtles as the protagonists for biographical, like telling biographical stories. And then I have this ABC book that is full of alliterations. So I gave myself a title. I'm an eco-surrealistic alliterator. Eco-surrealistic alliterator. And I think everybody should give themselves a title. Maybe I'll attach Duke to it, you know? The Duke of eco-surrealistic alliteration. So that's where that comes from. If you look up like who I am and sort of why, it's a good question. I've never actually sewn it together, so there's a clear explanation. When you look at the work, it's almost easy to figure out, right? So
right.
Yeah.
So again, looking at your bio, you have a long list of inspirations, not just the environment, but it's a huge list. How did all of these inspirations lead to this particular interest in the environment?
Well, I've been going to art school my whole life. If I can continue to go to art school, I would. I went to the Art Students League when I was 13 years old, studied life drawing. I went to the High School of Art and Design. This is in Manhattan. It's a magnet school for kids who are crazy and want to become artists. I went to a school in Los Angeles called Art Center. And Art Center was a school that was kind of had a rich vein of editorial and advertising art disciplines. And as you know, no matter what school you're in, you're going to meet these different teachers. Every teacher is going to like hit you with their favorites, right? So one of my teachers turned me on to Hokusai. He's a Japanese printmaker from the late 1800s. I went to Art Center and you got to study the history of illustration, and illustrators lived like kings when they started to figure out how to have full color printing. And like the golden age of illustration might have been from like 1920 to like 1960 or something. And so I looked at advertising art the same way I looked at Salvador Dali's art, right? To me, it was extremely well done. And the advertising art like is funny because it always has an insipid smile. It's like always like a lady holding a toaster and she's smiling or something.
Right.
And so there's that influence. There's Japanese, like, okay, so advertising art, what I grabbed onto, the style of rendering that went into it was very much from the Renaissance. It was modeling, three-dimensional lighting. Japanese watercolor prints are very linear. It's very important as to how they put a line around a figure, not how they shade it in. Then you have M.C. Escher, who is just like a trip and a half. It's sort of like, let's take some acid and look at Escher. And then you have Dali, and it's sort of, let's take some more acid and look at Dali. And so you have all this, like people ask me, how good an artist do you think you are? And I go, well, I have to judge myself from where we are today to 500 years previously, because it goes from the Renaissance to where we are. And I don't even know if I'm keeping up with what's contemporary, although I did start an NFT site, but it's in a very nascent state right now.
Okay.
And so you can't help, if this is what you do, get influenced by more things than you can actually handle. Whatever you read on my website, just put X10 after it. And that's how many influence. I'm going to be influenced by this interview. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Victor, as part of your awesome career, so we know that you were hired to teach conceptual thinking for illustrators.
Yeah.
And your own illustrations, began making into some pretty big publications. So can you tell us about some of your work and the publications that they appeared in?
Well, we started out with me teaching conceptual thinking, which is a funny thing to do because you never know where to start and you don't want to overwhelm your students. And then you asked me where my illustrations wound up. I've illustrated numerous articles for the New York Times.
Okay.
And more than not, they like your ideas, but they half the time, or more than half the time, they kind of tell you what they want. But that was sort of like an up and down situation. Sometimes people just want you for your hands. Sometimes they want you for your brains. And the Times wanted both. I did work for Rolling Stone magazine. They just wanted you to come up with something as flipped out as you could for the most part. I was influenced by Chuck Close at one point. He's a fine artist who did a lot of portraits of his friends. I started doing these little portraits of my friends, and they were on 4x5 canvases, but they were rendered with very small brushes, which is a little bit smaller than I would ever think I would do. And that led to doing stamps for the post office. So that was a big job. And if you illustrate for 25 years, like every 2 weeks you might have another job.
Exactly.
You might run into like what looks like this most fabulous resume, but a serious illustrator will have a fabulous resume. Like I did work for Estee Lauder. They're a cosmetic company. I didn't know that they would ever call me, and I loved working with them. I didn't work for the Beatles. I was too young when they broke up.
But in 1980, 26-year-old Victor Stabin received a commission every Kiss fan is very well aware of. So tell us about your first meeting with Paul, Gene, and Ace.
Well, this pre-first meeting, first they found me. How did they find me? In a directory of illustration that I was asked to submit a piece of artwork that was based on the cartoon called Prince Valiant. And so I'll find this and give it to you. You might, this is like what I think is most interesting about meeting Kiss. I got this assignment as an illustrator. It was to replicate the style of this cartoonist from, when I say cartoonist, this guy could draw like Frank Frazetta from the 40s, let's say. And Kiss saw it, and they were going for the cartoon strip for their cover. And they called me up, the agency called me up, the art director from the agency called me up and said, you know, we represent Kiss, we want to see how you think. Will you please, like, come, we'll give you the whole script for the cover, come up with the first panel. So we negotiated a price, and I knew that this would be a really important drawing. So I put a lot into it, and they said, you got the job. And so then I'm doing the job, and as I'm starting the job and paint is going on the panels, there's 3 panels. If you look at the album cover, it's like three panels deep, or 3 rows deep. And they'd come by they gave me a month to do 13 paintings. I don't paint that fast. And I knew that this was going to be important paintings. I didn't want to slough it off. So I was working with a guy named Mark Samuels, who was, he asked me like who my influences were. This guy who sat next to me in high school was basically my biggest influence. And he was the most brilliant artist I've ever met. And so I hired him to help me design it while I was painting it. And so as we were like designing and painting, they came by to look at what we were doing. Gene did most of the speaking.
Okay.
The drummer wasn't around anymore. And they'd pop in to see how it was going. So every time they came by, it was a situation where I had slept 2 hours that day. I was sort of like, oh, I'm meeting Kiss and I'm a zombie. That's great. They were very nice. They're very professional.
So you worked closely with Gene in developing the comic strips for the album cover. What was it like working with Gene?
He knew comic art.
Yeah.
And he made legitimate suggestions that I don't remember what they were, but like every once in a while, you'll be working with a client and you'll think, oh, why are they asking me to do this? Well, wait a second, let me start this way. Most of the time you'll be working with a client and you'll just think, why are they asking me to do this? This is so stupid. And Gene was not stupid, and everything he spoke about was pretty spot on. I don't remember what it was, but he made suggestions that we did everything he wanted, but he didn't really say a lot. So he was kind of digging it, and that was good.
Cool.
And Victor, at that time, you mentioned that before, but it wasn't public knowledge that Peter Chris, the drummer, was leaving the band. So on the poster, so you drew Peter with a wink, okay? Was the significance of that wink that in fact Peter was leaving the band? Was there kind of a hidden message somewhere?
I did the artwork. I did the, okay. I did the poster first. I knew that the poster was going to be the most exciting thing for me because it was going to be poster size. And he has his eyes open on the piece of artwork I did for the poster. And the art director said to me, I'm going to get that photographed and then I'm going to give it back to you. And then you're going to make him wink. Right.
Okay.
And they didn't tell the members in the band. And maybe they didn't tell the members in the band because, you know, who knows these guys? Like, oh, he's winking. How come I'm not winking? So I don't know how that works. But he said, the art director said to me, don't tell anybody you did this. It's going to be a surprise.
Okay.
And so it wasn't my idea. It was their script. Certain ideas I came up with that are kind of quirky, but it was their concept.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And looking at what you did today, are you happy with the artwork for the album?
I love it. I don't paint like that. I sort of render things more, I'll glaze things with an airbrush more. I don't rely on my like brushwork that much, but under like this time constraint, excuse me, under this time constraint, I didn't really have time to finesse everything the way I might have.
Okay.
And so you get to see what the real Victor Stabin does when he just slams the paint down.
Mhm.
And I look at it, there's not one thing I want to change on that,
There you go.
which is cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay.
So Victor, I hope you don't mind if I ask the next question. The final panel of the album, where it says, "I still think they stink," is a point of contention with a lot of Kiss fans. What was the rationale behind that final panel?
Getting paid.
Good answer.
I wanted to get paid.
Was that your idea? Was it scripted?
No. It was not my copy. It was their copy. When I say their idea, it could have been the art directors, the band's idea. They could have like felt it's time for self-deprecating humor.
Okay.
That's what it is. And
Mhm.
it wasn't for me to ask.
Right.
Okay.
That was not my job.
That's right.
So I don't know.
Got it. Got it.
All right.
So, Victor, we mentioned earlier on the show that your inspirations were really far removed from Kiss. So, before you received your commission to work on the Unmasked album, were you aware of Kiss? Did you like the band?
Everybody's aware of Kiss. Come on, they back in the New York groove. I lived in New York City. I saw 60 Minutes interviewing Kiss years before, first band to make $1 billion. Was a Kiss fan, I'm more of a jazz fan. Like there's certain songs that you love by The Who, but I never had to buy the album because it was always on the radio.
Mhm.
Right.
So Kiss was kind of like that. They were like part of the culture. And they're part of the culture to the point where when they called me to do the job, I said, wow, now I'm going to be part of the culture. And the next year I went to Hong Kong for a month to work for a clothing manufacturer who wanted designs. And I had this sidekick who wanted to learn English, who worked in the office I was working in. And so walking down the street one day, and he says, "What does your work look like?" I walked into a record store in Hong Kong and I said, "It looks like this," right? So they were a part of the global culture. And that's kind of like a mind-blowing step. One day you're here, one day you fall through the rafters into the stream. Like this isn't really part of the interview because we spoke about that beforehand, but things can change in like just the smallest instant.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, Victor, you were saying that, Kiss was a global phenomenon. Now, on the episode before this one, we did what we call a discussion panel, where we discussed whether or not the Unmasked era was the beginning of the decline of Kiss. Now, having worked with Kiss in 1980, what are your thoughts about this? Do you remember this being a decline, or do you think this era was the beginning of a decline for Kiss? What do you think?
I don't have a good answer for you because, rock and roll is a hormonal thing. They turned it into a theatrical thing. They are still working if they want to.
Yeah.
And the Rolling Stones are sort of like a cover band for the Rolling Stones. I think when rock bands seem to have their heyday, but creatively, once they hit like a certain age, there's a wall and they just start covering themselves. I saw an interview with Billy Joel and he says, I haven't written a new, this is like not that long ago. He said, I haven't written a new song in 15 years. Like, I think there's this certain well that disappears. And so it seems to happen not to Kiss, but to everybody.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, true. So true.
Yeah.
But I'm not thinking about it deeply enough where, like, I'm not an expert. It's just my thought.
Oh, but that's a good one. So it's true. So true. Victor, we have discussed, in the show how your work is a reflection of your life experiences, and a theme in your works is the fragility of life. And can you share with us a little about your battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or NHL?
Well, when I was 47, I was diagnosed. Well, when I was 47, I had a tumor over my heart about the size of an orange, and I couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the hospital, and the doctor said, "We don't know what you have. We're having too hard a time, like getting a biopsy of it. You're going to die tomorrow unless we give you this chemotherapy, this medication called CHOP, which is an anagram for something." And they approached me with they showed me what it was. It was a syringe that was like a couple of hundred cc's that they pumped into, it was bright orange like Tang. They pumped it into my arm. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk like 6 steps to go to the bathroom. They pumped it into my arms. They gave me some steroids. And the next day, I was dancing in the hallway like Fred Astaire. And it was like, hey, there's no problem. I made it. But then they said, well, we got rid of your tumor, but we got to figure out what it is, because if it's a certain kind of tumor and it comes back,
okay,
it'll kill you in 2 weeks. We got to figure out what it is you had. And then they opened my chest and they went to take it out. But the CHOP chemotherapy killed it to the point where they didn't know what I had. And so they said, worst case scenario, you had this and we want to treat you for it. And it was 2 years of chemotherapy that was, you ever see like pictures where chemo patients just looked like they were dragged by, like tied up and dragged by the back of a truck or something? Mm-hmm. I was so ugly, uglier than I am now, that I put newspapers over my mirrors in my house for 2 years. I didn't want to look at my face. And after my last shot of chemo, I said to my doctor, I said, so what do I do now? Do I come back? Do I get scans? What do you do? He goes, if what you had comes back, you'll be dead in 2 weeks. There's no stopping it. But there's an 89% chance that it won't come back. So this was
40.
It was 23 years ago.
Okay.
Wow. All right. So that's fragility. And like one of my doctors was a friend of mine, and he called up my other friends and he said, go say goodbye to him because he's going to be dead soon.
Wow.
But I didn't die. And I didn't die yesterday when I fell through the rafters. And they're calling me the cockroach. And so I was an illustrator, and I was starting to blend photography with painting. And I was doing all this commercial work. Even when I did the Kiss album cover, I felt like I was in the wrong place. I thought to everybody slapped me on the back, and I said to myself, you should be doing your own stuff. You shouldn't be working for Kiss. They should be playing music at your party.
Mm-hmm.
But I never got there until I got cancer. And then when I got cancer, I said, well, you know, you might have a year, you might not, you might have longer. You don't know what you have, but you know that if it comes back, you may be dead in 2 weeks. Do what you want to do, right?
Okay.
So I started my Turtle series, and I never looked back. And I said to myself, I'm never doing another illustration again. And the post office called me as soon as I said that, and they gave me 9 stamps. So it's hard to have the strength of your convictions, but post office was like just too hard to refuse. It was like getting a call from Jessica Rabbit.
You can't say no.
Did not say no. Yeah.
So now, in closing, I can't believe this interview is already almost over. Any recent works that you'd like to share? Anything new coming up in the near future?
Well, the ABC book I made, okay, this is the real story. The real story is I moved out of New York City. I wound up in Pennsylvania. I was renting a space in a building that was 16,000 square feet. And it came up for sale, and I bought it for next to nothing. So I created an environment where one room or section at a time, I created gallery space that I put my work in, or I had studio space to like think bigger, that I wouldn't be cramped. I could do whatever I wanted. I never had to worry about space again. And so when I made the ABC book, it got its own room and every page was framed. And people would come up to me and say, what's the story? What are the stories for these characters? And every time somebody said it to me, I go, I don't know, right? I'm not a writer, but enough people throw peanuts at you, you're an elephant. So I started writing stories. I was reading a lot of stories to my kids, and I just decided, write stories as brief as Aesop's fables. So I started writing stories for these characters, and I showed it to a cousin of mine who works at Random House, and he said, Vic, look, I got to tell you something. You got to keep your day job. The only person who makes money in writing is Stephen King. And I thought to myself, I'm going to turn these stories into animations. And so I just made an animation called E = MC cubed instead of squared. And it's based on one of the stories I made for the characters in my book. And it's a story about Albert Einstein making a safety refrigerator in 1922 in Berlin. And I just got into I think my 14th film festival, and it gleamed 4 best ofs and show. And so that's something that I'm going to put on my website maybe within the next 6 weeks. To go into film festivals, you can't really have a public spot, a public URL where people can see the work. And what I wanted to do was get these awards from the festivals. So as I shop this animation around, it's already been somewhat accredited. So that's a thing that you can see. The other thing that you could see is if you're in Northeast Pennsylvania, you can visit my building. It's called the Stabin Museum. And you guys should come down from Canada. Where are you in Canada?
Montreal. We're about 6 hours away, 6.5 hours away.
You should visit. You should visit.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing the turtle series.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
I'm painting. Basically, I'm painting. Trying to figure out how to sew 2 animations together so they look like stories in a book that can be seen on a screen. I'd like to make a feature-length animation that maybe feature-length animation's an hour long. I'm not quite sure. I have about 25 minutes of it already, but I want to get it funded so that it's not, the expense of it is it's an enormity because it's so much work. So I'm shopping that around. And my building has a restaurant and a bar, and it has gallery that has all my work in it, all the work we spoke about. And I got 2 kids, and one just got into, I have one kid who's a pianist who's just hit the 2nd year of her college education, and I have another kid who's becoming an artist, who's a better artist than I am.
Wow.
When I was her age, I couldn't do what she did. I look at her and I go, this is really amazing.
Lovely.
So I'm busy. I'm very busy. It's nice to, you guys asked great questions.
Well, thank you.
It was really well prepared.
Thank you.
And you did a little bit of homework, and this was good. I'd like to help you by giving you pictures.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so it'll make a lot of sense if you see, really, you got to put good pictures in a thing like
yeah,
that.
we put images to the words. Absolutely. I just want to say that we can't thank you enough for your time. It's been really interesting. That this podcast is related to KISS, but it's been much more fun knowing your life story and everything that you've done and what you're doing, and you're part of history, that's for sure. Everybody knows that. So it's been a true pleasure to have you in the show. Thank you very much.
Oh, one last thing. In my building, because my daughter is a jazz pianist, we opened up a jazz club.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
It's a 16,000 square foot building, so we're always evolving it to the next stage. And I guess I thank you too. It's really kind, and it's like just really weird. 42 years later, people
Yeah.
say, "Do you want to talk about the Kiss album cover?"
Yeah.
I just can't believe it. It's so, I couldn't have like predicted, like I'm 26 years old when I'm 68. People are going to be asking me to talk about this.
Yeah.
Well, Victor, I mean, I met you at the New Jersey Kiss Expo when you
A
were
little
there
while ago,
several
right?
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you remember the fans that they were all around you asking you questions, and they were totally fascinated by you. I mean, like Claudio said, you are part of history.
I know. And I actually got I was leaving, and it was Sunday, and I had a goal where I wanted to hit a certain amount of money. And I was with it was so funny. I was with my daughter, and she's like, I think she's 16 at the time, but she has a real serious side. So she was helping me with sales. And, you know, as a dad, like you always put your kids on a pedestal, but my daughter stepped up to the plate, and she was like a home run hitter. It was like really unbelievable. She turns around, she looks at me, she goes, "Dad, these people really like you."
Yeah.
Like, totally unbelievable that somebody could like their father this much. And so we were there for like the last half hour, and I said, "Gotta make another $500 before I leave." So I yelled into the crowd, "We're having a BOGO, buy one, get one free." We hit the number we wanted to. And just as I was leaving, somebody who was Ace's manager, I forget his last name, might have been Kulik or Eric Kulik. It's like, I don't have it right, but I have it somewhere in my email files.
Okay.
He said to me, "We want to talk to you about doing one of his album covers." And I just thought, hey, if it happens, fine. And it's nice to get out of the house and make this connection. And so I met him. I gave him some like ideas. It didn't come to fruition, but he did something really unusual. He called me up a year later, and he wrote me a letter saying, "I really want to thank you for your time. We went in another direction. It had nothing to do with you, the kind of work you do. You can never tell who's in charge. You know, it's sort of like somebody gets married to somebody, and you got a sister-in-law, and she goes, 'Got to use this guy.' So you can't take anything personally." But I had never in my life gotten a letter that explained how happy somebody was to meet me, and they look forward to possibly working with me in the future. It's like, that doesn't happen. You don't get the job. You don't hear from these people again.
Right.
So that was kind of nice. And then the guy who put that show together is Peter Arquette.
Yeah.
And he doesn't live that far from me in Pennsylvania. He came by a couple of days ago, and he just wanted to check out the museum with his sister because we have a restaurant. They had lunch here. And I have a minor relationship with him in that I went to a party at his house. We know each other, and he's come to a couple of jazz shows here. And I told him about you guys, and he said nice things about you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
there you go. There you go. Everybody,
Honored.
Kiss, to me, Kiss people really like talking about Kiss. You asked me the broadest set of questions anybody's ever asked me. And I've always found that Kiss fans genuinely, for the most part, are really nice people. There is a sect of Kiss fans that wants to scam you and see if they can get a free drawing. That's life. But for the most part, they're really like a terrific group of like fans. I don't know.
Well,
I don't have fans that are like connected to something other than what I do, except this Kiss situation. I like you guys.
Well, thank you so much.
Say yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Kind.
Victor, where could fans get the poster and the artwork for Unmasked?
So if you go to victorstabin.com, thank you for doing like what I should be doing. If you go to victorstabin.com, there'll be a menu bar on top. It'll say something like posters or store or something. Once you go there, you poke around for a minute, you can find it.
Right.
Okay.
So that's simple.
Amazing, amazing. So, Victor, once again, I want to second what Claudio said. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show, and
my show now. I'm in
it's your
charge.
show. Exactly. And
It
like
is
so
your
many
show.
Kiss fans, We like you very much. We're so
All right.
glad you were here. And, you know, like you said, this is a Kiss-related podcast, but we talked beyond Kiss. And that's what made this particular interview so interesting. So, to the Kiss Army, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, never stop rocking. Take care, everyone.
Rock on with your bad self. Bye-bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Spotify, Automatic, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to make yourself heard. Leave us a comment on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. See you all soon, Kiss Army.